Hello there, it's October and the sun's shining in on me today. So, happy October everybody. Now, I started a project and I have uploaded one video related to this because I saw a pattern design and liked it, and it was from Donna Jordan. She'd done a pattern on fish and she'd done it as a full patchwork quilt, and she's brilliant, isn't she? But she doesn't give the dimensions. And I've got a friend who's got a birthday coming up, and I thought, well, I've got 6 weeks before her birthday. I wonder whether I can do something that looks like fish for her birthday and create a patchwork throw for her. So I wasn't under any time pressure, and I found this lovely fabric in Aldi. And now the fabric is very stiff with dressing in the shop, and there are a few imperfections in it, so I washed it and pressed it before I proceeded. When I saw this fabric and changed the orientation, I thought it might be ideal to use postage stamp patchwork, that's 1.5 inch squares, to create the fish. Now that meant that I needed to make my own design pattern and follow that through. And I wanted to add some additional reclaimed fabric with it. And I might have bitten off more than I can chew. It might be just a little bit too difficult for me, and I made mistakes. So I had started to make this video and I'm restarting it because what I want to do here is show you tips and tricks of what to do. And then I'm going to show you what mistakes I made. I'm at the point now where I now start to need to make a decision. And I'd like you to leave a comment below because I'd like your opinion. I'll ask the question towards the end as which way I should progress, which way looks best. Because when I'm doing a piece, I feel now I've done a sample that's incorrect. There's certain things I've done that I don't like on it, and I think I can improve on it. I certainly wouldn't want to create that sample in a whole patchwork throw. It's not good enough to gift. So I'm in this one. If I give you a laugh by my naivety in cutting things wrong or adding extra borders on, or have you heard the saying, trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear? Well, I think I've got a sow's ear. And sometimes when you know you've got a sow's ear, call it quits and move on and try a different method. And I think that's what I'm likely to do. So let's start by having a look at the fabric and what I began doing. Okay? And then let me know in your comments. And then I've marked them in these plastic cello bags so I know which pattern piece is which. Because I'm going to follow a pattern, and I'm going to show you that next. Right, this is my pattern, and the design that I've got seemed okay on paper. This is using a scale, a 1/4 inch scale, using a 10-inch block, and that seems fine. Now I worked out and cut out my 1.5 inch squares, and I worked out how many I would need of each pattern piece. Do pause if you need to pause the video on that pattern. Now, this is where I think I went wrong. With hindsight, what I did was I sewed together all the full blocks of the full pieces, and then I had to work out about how to do the half square triangles. And when I came to do the piece, I've realised one of my mistakes was I counted an inch, so 8 inches for 4 repeat pattern pieces here. And in my head, a half square triangle was 1/2 inch, which meant that on this 10-inch block, I would end up with half an inch and then a seam allowance, so it would look like the fish would be floating. Well, that's not the case, is it? Honestly, my brain with the maths, it's a full 10 inches, so I didn't want to chop the corner off. I've not chopped the corner off here where the fish start swimming at the nose. What's this bit called towards the tail? I haven't managed to block those off, but that was one of the big mistakes I made. I did count sufficient for cutting enough pattern pieces, and then I had sufficient pattern piece left over to cut more fabric if I needed to. And I decided that I was going to do this on a white background, and that's where I made mistakes. So let's see where I went wrong. I started to cut my fabric and sew it on the machine in columns, and thus far this worked very well. I needed to see how I was going to attach the postage stamp patchwork onto a contrast which was going to be a white background, which meant I need to cut columns down here. And I thought if I cut 12-inch pieces of cotton, I've then got more than I need and I can always cut it down. And that was fine. What I needed to do was work out how to attach the cotton here and a method that would work for me. And I did a sample piece. And my example went well. I worked out how to attach it and then cut the piece underneath as a strip, top and bottom, and then connect it to these pieces. And I continued going until I'd done the whole fish. So far, so good. This is my sample, and I call this a faulty sample. I don't mind a little bit of error here. I can correct this the more I go through. This is what I call the first pancake. The first pancake is wrong. I would bury this fish somewhere in the middle of the patchwork quilt, and I was intending to do 9 of them. I did have a problem with ironing it though, and I've done something that I don't normally do, and I ironed the seams open, and that really gave a lot of indentation. Really wasn't happy with the effect I got there. And I used my easy ruler to cut, and I worked from the midline here, put 5 inches, add 5.5 inches to get myself a 10.5-inch block, which would leave me a 10-inch block and a 1/4-inch seam allowance. And I cut it wrong. I cut it at 10 inches. And I measured it twice. I used an erasable ink pen, and then I cut along the ink pen. And when I came to attach it, I thought, but I've cut off my end. This is where I realised in my head this was 1/2 inch, and it's not, it's a full inch. That's my first mistake. The second mistake was using the ruler to cut outwards and not concentrating enough. I'm not experienced enough with the rulers, and I cut it too short. I was really annoyed with myself, and I thought, well, I'm going to progress with this. So what I did was I added extra fabric on as a border, and then I cut it to the 10.5-inch piece that I wanted. The problem with that is you then end up with these bitty borders. I'm going to be almost sewing in the ditch when I'm trying to attach this to any sashing. The next thing is, it almost seemed to, I didn't like the ditch effect here. Didn't like that at all, and it's almost lost its dullness. Now, the next thing I was happy with. So in the sample, I wanted to cut the fabric into 10.5-inch squares, and I've done that. So I'm now committed to doing a 10.5-inch square. I think I'll leave this as a faulty sample. I've got plenty of cotton to repeat and do the fish again. I've got plenty of white cotton to do more backgrounds. And I did something right. I managed to cut all the fabric that I wanted, and I'm going to do an ombre effect over my patchwork piece. I used 2 pieces of cotton that I had in the pack, and then I added to it, you'll see that this and sorry, this one and this one are the two pieces that I had in the pack. This is the linen shirt that I've shown you that I cut up, and this was formerly a shirt that was cut on the bias, and I've cut those into 2.5-inch strips, and they're 10.5 inches. So I'm committed now by doing that into recreating a 10.5-inch block. That I'm happy with my pattern though, but I've now cut a 12-inch square of white cotton. It needs another iron again today. And I'm going to do something, and I'm going to applique onto this, so that rather than having the dimps and troughs, peaks and troughs here, I'm going to have it flat on it. And I want to see whether to patchwork. I'll certainly patchwork the fish, but do I want to applique it? So I looked at what I normally do with patchwork postage stamp is I do it by hand. So I've done this by hand. I'm halfway through. I've done the front part of the fish, and it's almost got the vibrancy that I wanted again on this, and it's got some dimension on it. Certainly the ironing of it really made it go flat, and I thought, really, I want that to stand out against the white cotton. I'm going to sit and do the back part of the fin tonight. I'm happy that once I press that, I can get those points eased in. I'm happy, and it will certainly fit on this 12-inch piece now. I wanted to see if I was going to applique, how I would connect it. If I did it by hand, can you see here? I've got two different types of stitching. This is a very fine sort of slip stitch with single cotton thread, and the other is a very fine, this is a cotton, and I've done a blanket stitch on that. Can you see? It is very tiny. Will that just pick up? That's a blanket stitch, and that's what it looks like on the edge. Now, that, although that blanket stitch looks nice, it feels a bit bumpy. I actually prefer the feel of this one. What I want to know in your comments is, how do you think I should proceed with this? I think I'm committed to continuing with the patchwork fish done on the machine, and I will see what I think, what one of those looks like. I've actually sewed, excuse me, I've already sewed the columns down, and I've already done 12 fish, so I don't really want to be unpicking it. And what I'm veering towards is a postage stamp patchwork fish appliqued onto a 12-inch block, which I'll then cut down. Once I'm happy that I can centre it, I can cut this down to 10.5 inches. I intend to do sashing like this. This was my attempt on my faulty sample. I intend to do sashing at two ends and the cornerstone. So I've now completed two samples. This was my faulty sample, and this was using strips with patchwork half square triangles and a 2.5-inch border. I haven't ironed the border under on this one, and this is my second. On this second sample, I have appliqued the patchwork fish. It's still a patchwork fish in postage stamps. I've added a 2-inch border and a cornerstone all the way around, and I must admit I prefer this one. Now, so far I've just ironed under the seam allowance. I'll work out the sizes. Measuring across at the moment, this is 12 inches by 14.5 inches, and I think that this is the design that I'm going to go for. I think that the stripes that we had on the patchwork was very distracting. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to magnify it a little bit. You know that I've just added a little bit of personal interest to everything I do. So I'm just going to add a few bubbles here and there out of patchwork fabric in the different styles and designs coming up from the fish. I've got different colours and different designs. Not that I can get them out with my fingers at the moment, look. And that'll just add just a little bit of interest, won't it? That doesn't look very round. Well, we'll add just a little bit of interest to each square. So just let me know in your comments. Do you agree with me? Do you think that this second piece is much better than the first piece? I'm going to do 12 of these, so it's quite a lot of involved work, but personally I prefer this one. Let me know in your comments whether you